skins are hanging over there. Those deer skins is money back in them days. The English told us, yes, you can have our things, and they give us some of them when we would help them and show them things. But now we don't need our help as much anymore. Now they want us to bring the deer skins as money. Now those are boy deers, and boy deers are called a buck. And have you ever heard of your money called a buck? $5, $10? Well, there's real bucks. And that's how money got its name, bucks. It was because back then, it really was a buck. One deer skin would only buy a metal knife. To get a gun, 30 or maybe 50 deer skins, depending on the gun. It got to where every tribe knew that the animal skins was valuable, and every hunter was out there trying to hunt the deer. Instead of for eating and surviving, now the deer had become money. We had lost our respect for the deer. Pretty soon, there was no more deer left in our woods. We had to begin eating small animals. And to this day, our tribe has a ceremony known as the squirrel dinner, where we eat squirrel meat for an evening to remind us of that time when we had killed off the deer and had none left. Starvation. And then the land lay empty of its animals. The chiefs would sell a piece of it here to pay off what we owe to the trading post. Eventually, the lands of Georgia will become American. And at the end of the Revolutionary War, the new president, George Washington, he wants to meet with the tribes and sign new agreements, treaties. In 1790, our chief at the time, Alexander McGilvery, good native name, huh? You have to understand, in this time, many of the native people of the Cherokee and the Creek and other tribes were mixed blood, mixed with runaway slaves, mixed with white English and Spaniards and many others, the French. When you went to Alabama, at one time that was French territory. And so the Muskogeans out there intermarried with the French, learned to speak the French words. In Georgia, the English, they learned the English ways. And so we were mixed bloods a lot in that time. The Scots had married into our tribes a lot. A lot of the traders who were trading post owners would marry an Indian wife to be able to have their trading post in the village. And so this allowed for the mixed blood children to grow up, speaking the words of the European as well as the native, but more importantly from the proper clan, the Wynn clan. So he was the chief at that time in 1790. A meeting spot that was chosen was Stone Mountain because everybody knew where it was, and it was where two major trails came to a crossroads. And so this was the spot chosen to meet. As the delegation of Americans and Creek Indians came together, they headed to New York City, which was the capital at the end of the Revolutionary War. And they signed the Treaty of New York, giving away a large portion of Georgia as payment for what we had owed in trading. And so this is how we lost lots of the lands. The rest of it we would lose in a great, great war known as the Creek Wars. The Creeks, some had decided to go and stay more civilized, if you want to say it that way, or more modern. Some wanted to go back and live the old ways and go back to the ways of the ancestors. And it caused a great strife between the tribe, a civil war. Andrew Jackson's army would come out of Georgia and Tennessee and fight us and drive us out of Georgia and Alabama. Down into Florida, many of the runaways would go to join up with runaway slaves who would also escape down into Spanish territory. And the Spaniards would see this movement and these new tribes coming, and they called them for runaway or wild, cimarron. But our way of saying it is a lot different than that. We say it like this, Seminole. And they had become a new people in that time. Now our story is ancient, and I have skipped a lot of the old ways, which I'd like to share with you. Would you like to see some of the ways we would catch a fish?
Yes.
It's one person, that's it?
Yeah.
You know, the English called us the Creeks because we lived by rivers and by creeks. And so creek is kind of a nickname, but we did live by rivers and creeks. And if you wanted to find us, you better start following the river, because that's where we lived. As I was explaining, our homes being very permanent because we were farmers. but we were also fishermen. This fish trap would be taken down to the creek and set right in the middle with a rock on the back so it can't float away. And then we'll take a whole bunch of rocks and build walls. And you know, to this day in Georgia, there's many rivers that have rock walls in them, and they were built long ago by the ancestors to guide the fish right into the trap. Once the fish go inside, sharp spikes facing in keep the fish from coming back out. Those spikes are looking right into their eyeballs as they try and make it back out. To take the fish out of here, the inner basket can be untied and we can dump out our fish. We carve bones and wood and shells into fishing hooks. We made yucca into ropes and strings. We use corn cobs as floats and shells and rocks as sinkers. No fishing pole. Instead, this would be tied to a branch of a tree, baited, thrown in the water, and we might have 10 or 20 of them on the bank of the river at the same time. Another way to catch a fish is to use a spear, like the gig that I have right here. If I see a fish swimming by, I can harpoon it, and as soon as I do, that spearhead, because it has that Christmas tree shape to it, the barbs stick into the fish, it comes off, and that fish takes off swimming away, fighting hard. If I pull on this rope too quick, it'll get away and it'll break loose. So I'll let the fish swim, because everywhere that fish goes, this float will be following that fish. And whenever I see that float, I know my fish is there. When it's not moving, then it's time to get your fish. Bring it in. Native people did lots of fishing, living by rivers, lots of ways. I have lots of fish hooks back there by my dugout canoe. We were also hunters, but when we killed the animals, it wasn't to be mean. Long before hunting ever began, ceremonies and dances were done in the village to honor these animals we are going to kill. When the hunter would make his kill, the hunter would go to the animal and apologize in a prayer, telling him we are sorry. Nothing would be wasted. The animal's coat or skin can be made into leather. That's where leather comes from, animal skins. Using the brain of the animal, which has tannin in it, to tan the hide. Tribes all over North America knew how to tan a hide using the brain. And you know what? It makes some of the softest leather you'll ever touch. But don't worry, the brains aren't on there no more. Just a little while. Tanning a hide. Maybe I'll take that deer skin and I'll dry it in the sun and I'll make rawhide. Say that, rawhide. Rawhide. We can take that rawhide and cut it into strips and make lacing. We can use that rawhide as a bucket to hold water, or how about a cook-in bucket? The old way of cooking, before pottery, we dug a hole in the ground and lined it with an animal skin. Then we put water and food in there, and then hot stones were taken out of the fire, using sticks to drop them back and forth from the fire into the bucket to cook that food. That is the old way of cooking. And then the clay pots. And by the way, the oldest cooking pots in the United States